Hi everyone, Pastor Jimmy at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, bringing you a video on Easter week and the events that are happening during the week of Easter in the life of Jesus Christ. If you look at Palm Sunday, yesterday we saw how Jesus came into Jerusalem. As he came into Jerusalem, we saw the prophecies fulfilled that he is the Messiah. We saw the people of Israel, the people of Jerusalem singing praises to his name and singing Hosanna, thinking that he was coming in to rescue them from the Romans. We saw how the people in Jerusalem were confused and not understanding who Jesus Christ truly was and who Jesus Christ truly is. As Jesus left Jerusalem that night, he just went a little while outside of Jerusalem, spent the night. And now on Monday, we're going to be in Mark chapter 11, verses 12 through 14 to begin with. And we're going to see Jesus entering back into Jerusalem again. No fanfare this time, but we're going to see what happens as he walks back into Jerusalem. So Mark chapter 11, beginning in verse 12. Now the next day, when they had come out from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing from afar a fig tree having leaves, he wanted to see if perhaps he would find something on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. In response, Jesus said to it, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again." And his disciples heard it. So, as he was returning to Jerusalem that morning, him and his disciples were going back to worship and to do a few things in Jerusalem. We see him walk over to the fig tree, and him being hungry, he sees it, and he's expecting to get some fruit off of it, get a fig off of it. When he can't, he curses the tree and says, "Let no one eat from you again." We'll see later on Jesus explain the reason behind this, but his disciples heard it. And we see in the Old Testament, a lot of times, we see that the fig tree, that Israel is characterized by a fig tree in a few books in the Old Testament. And so, in a way, this is symbolizing God's judgment upon a nation that on the outside looks good. On the outside has the outward appearance of life, but on the inside there is no life, as the Jewish nation, as the Israelites were at this time. So, we see this, and then the second thing we see is we see Jesus going into Jerusalem, and the first thing we see is him going to the temple. And this is Mark chapter 11, picking up in verse 15. So they came to Jerusalem. Then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. Then he taught, saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of thieves." And the scribes and chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him. For they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his teaching. When evening had come, he went out of the city. So now we see Jesus Christ going into the temple. And he goes in the temple and he sees something that is against God. He sees all these money exchangers and he sees all these people selling animals. So here's what's happening. This was the time of the Passover. And during the Passover, the people from all over the world, all the Jewish people would come back to Jerusalem, and they would have sacrifices and they would have things that they would have to do to be forgiven of their sins that the religious leaders of the day had set up in the temple. There were certain coins that they had to have and certain types of animals without blemish that they had to have. Well, these merchants, these people would come in and they would set up these tables inside of the temple, and they would exchange money for a high profit. They would sell unblemished animals for sacrifice at a high profit. Most people believe that during those days, the chief priest or the priest of the temple and those that worked in the temple made good money off of these merchants that were selling these items that were a necessity. So we see Jesus Christ coming in. We see him not liking what he's seeing because they've turned the house of God into a den of thieves. His words, not mine. They turn it into a den of thieves, and we see him clear it out and pronounce that it's to be a house of prayer, a house of worship. And we see Jesus begin to cleanse the temple and begin to prepare the people for what worship truly is. But at the end of this, we see that the chief scribes and those are really seeking to kill him at this point. This is when they really start trying to figure out how they can kill him and how fast they can kill him and how they can do it, because all the people were for Jesus at this time still, and they were wondering how they could do it without aggravating the people. One problem they had was if they aggravated the people, they could lose control or they could lose money. And so it was more about their personal gain than it was any religious gains. So on Monday, we see Jesus go into Jerusalem. As he's going in, we see him curse the fig tree. We'll learn about that later on. and then we see him cleanse the temple and really begin that death sentence, if you want to call it that, that will lead up to his arrest, his trial, and his crucifixion. So tomorrow we'll see what happens on Tuesday as Jesus continues his journey to the cross, as Jesus continues his journey to the grave, and then we celebrate on Easter his resurrection from the grave. So come back tomorrow, watch the video for Tuesday, and let's see what Jesus and his disciples are doing on Tuesday before his arrest.